My name is José Barzola. Welcome to our Careers in Peacebuilding Talk Story series. I'm here with the Matsunaga for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Our talk story today will focus on building rapport with parties in online mediation with Giuseppe Leone. Thank you for joining us today to learn about the journey into the profession. Our event today is co-sponsored by the Conflict Resolution Alliance that supports and develops peace builders in Hawaii. CRA is a collaborative of mediators and arbitrators, facilitators, educators, social workers, lawyers, psychologists, child and family advocates, problem solvers, and concerned citizens, all dedicated to the pursuit of peace. You can learn more about them at crahawaii.org. Thank you for joining us to learn about why building rapport with parties when you mediate online is as important, even though sometimes more difficult than when you mediate in person. Giuseppe Leone will share his lessons from the field, as well as some effective techniques from building the rapport online. Also, today is Conflict Resolution Day, so thank you also for being here to celebrate that with us today. Our special guest today is Giuseppe Leone, who is a retired mediator in Hawaii, where he has been practicing mediation since 1997. He became interested and started practicing online mediation in 1999. First by email, then via Skype, and finally in 2011 via Zoom. Giuseppe believes that the success of an online mediation depends mainly on the mediator's skills and experience, and not so much on the video conferencing software being used. With that said, for his online mediation practice, though, he does prefer Zoom. In addition, he trains mediators one-on-one, hands-on, how to be 100% ready and prepared when they offer online mediation to their clients. Shortly, I'll be sharing some resources in the chat, so you can sign up for one of these sessions or learn further about his work. And to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to our friend Giuseppe Leone, and I have some questions to kind of get us started. And welcome, Giuseppe, and could you open up and let us know a little bit about how you build rapport with parties in online mediation?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you all for thank you to the Matsunaga Institute for inviting me to this presentation. Thank you to José Barzola. And I was really looking forward to this presentation because I think it's an interesting topic. So I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, but I do have some notes. And if you're interested, to take a look at my notes, I will send a link to Jose and he can share it with you. So since I don't have a presentation, I think it's important for me to give you a clear outline of what I'm going to say and what I'm going to ask you today. Obviously, I'm going to answer the question, how do you build a rapport with the parties online? And I will suggest some specific steps for doing that. However, before going through those steps, I will begin by sharing with you a number of assumptions that I'm making about the parties and how I view mediation. In essence, my thinking is, if this is what the parties want and expect, out of mediation, and if this is who I am as a mediator, then I need to do something, or I better not to do something else. Now, those steps that I'm going to share with you very likely will not work for you, because probably you have different assumptions, if you have any, and you have a different view of mediation and a different view of your role as a mediator. And I'm going to talk about that, okay? During the presentation, I'm also going to share with you some books and resources that I found useful and that may be useful for you as well, all right? So to begin with, I would like to share with you the assumptions that I'm making about the parties who come to mediation, especially if they've never been in mediation before. And I will begin with their human needs, which are exactly the same needs that we all have, which means the need to be respected, to be understood, to be appreciated, to be treated kindly. Because being conflict, as we all know, is not easy, any kind of conflict. Also the need to make decisions by themselves without being pushed, okay? And in mediation, I will add, there is also the parties need to be treated impartially so that each party has an equal opportunity to share their feelings, their thoughts, and so on. Now, those needs are based on two theories. One by Abraham Maslow, okay, who came up many years ago with the pyramid of human needs. The other one, an author who I really like very much, is Marshall Rosenberg. He wrote a book about nonviolent communication. So those needs are based on those theories of those two gentlemen. Let's move on to the parties' feelings. I think that two major feelings of parties who come to mediation are anger and fear. Anger because they think that they are in a dispute because of the other party. Now, I always wondered why, when we have a dispute, we always blame someone else. And then I discovered that the answer is in Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance, which I'm going to share with you. So we all think we are reasonable, decent human beings. And decent human beings do not have conflicts, or if they do, they are able to resolve it. However, I do have a conflict with the person over there. And therefore, in order to preserve my self-image and my self-esteem as a decent person, I need to blame someone else. So that's why, if I understand correctly, that's why people need to blame someone else in mediation. The other feeling is obviously fear of the unknown. What could I possibly lose in this mediation? Okay. And that's why, in order to address the fear, I think it's imperative for mediators to be very clear. What are the benefits of mediation for those particular parties? Let's move on to the parties' expectations. I think that when people participate in mediation, they are asking, what's in it for me? How can mediation help me? How can this mediator help me? They do not want an explanation of mediation as a process or as an alternative process. They want some clear answers. How can mediation help me resolve this? So I think it's important for a mediator to be very clear about the benefits of mediation. Also, parties, I think, expect to feel in good hands. They want to see that their mediator is comfortable online. It comes across as a reliable, trustworthy person. They also want to know if the mediator cares about them. So the mediator doesn't see them as party number one or party number two, but the mediator sees them as persons, as human beings, fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters. Okay. Which obviously means that there has to be an element of empathy in the rapport with the parties. Now, I don't know whether you agree that such a list of parties' feelings, needs, expectations are a good starting point. Because if you say, well, if this is true, then I better do this rather than that. There is another part, though, and is that the relationship has to work both ways, not only for the parties, for the mediator as well. That's why the second topic that I have is I would like to share with you my view of mediation, which is probably different than yours, and my view of conflict. Okay, now I subscribe to the definition of conflict as explained by Douglas Stone and Sheila Hinn, who are of the Harvard Negotiation Project, and they wrote two books about this topic. One is called Difficult Conversations. The other one is called Thanks for the Feedback. The main argument about that book is that conflict, no matter what's about, has a certain structure. And it comes about because people have different interpretations of what happens. They also have selective memories, if I may add so. Also, they point out that conflict triggers parties' feelings very strongly and shake their sense of self. Okay, so my definition of conflict is in line with what Douglas Stone and Sheila Hinn claim in their books, actually, because there are two books. So my view of mediation. Unless you know it already, I will strongly recommend a book written by Michael Lang and Alison Taylor. It's called The Making of a Mediator, Developing Artistry in Practice. And in this book, both authors explain the professional development of a mediator, from novice to apprentice to practitioner to artist. And they also make an argument that at one point there has to be a balance in our idea of conflict, our values, our beliefs, and who we are as a human being. And I also subscribe to the idea that mediation is personal. It's very personal. And the same case mediated by two different mediators, even following the same methods, can yield completely different results. Okay. So not only mediation is personal, but mediation requires the mediator to be authentic. You cannot just apply techniques on the parties. You have to believe in what you do. You have to believe in what you say. Okay. Now let's move on to my mediation method. And again, I would like to recommend a book by Tara West. It's called The Mediator's Approach, 5 Paths Through Conflict. In that book, she describes 5 different mediation methods: evaluative methods, facilitative, often called problem solving, narrative, transformative, and understanding based. So I recommend that if you're not familiar with that book and with those methods, you take a look at that book, because she explains very clearly the difference between those methods, which are based on different assumptions, and they assume a different role. Just to give you an example how a method can make a difference, let me share a story that happened today, this morning. I had a chat with a mediator, an experienced mediator on the mainland, and she's experienced in transformative mediation. Okay. So we shared experiences. We're talking about landlord-tenant cases. Okay. And we came to the conclusion that, landlord-tenant cases are pretty much the same. But we discovered something very interesting. When I mediate as a volunteer mediator for the Mediation Center of the Pacific, as I've done since 1997. When I mediate landlord-tenant cases, I assume that being evicted is a tragic experience. And therefore, I do my best to make sure that the tenant makes a decision, an informed decision, based on some knowledge. For example, I could say to the tenant, since you agree that there is a back rent, okay? Have you ever seen a trial of landlord-tenant cases in court? Because from what I know, if you agree that you owe some back rent, the judge may well decide to evict you right away. So you and your family, could end up without a house. Okay, that will be my approach, because even though I'm neutral, as a human being, I don't like the idea of people being on the street. Okay, that mediator this morning said, "Oh no, if you tell the tenant, that there is a risk, you're not respecting their self-determination." So in her mind, it was more important to stick to the method, transformative method, rather than helping the tenant think through the consequences of his decision. Now, I'm not saying that what I think is better than what she thinks. What I'm saying is that be aware that besides the method, whatever method you learned during the training, there are more methods around. Number one. Number two, initially in your professional development, you will follow the method as closely as you can, but there is a point where you have to become the method. It's like when you write a book, right? Initially you emulate Mark Twain, Hemingway, right? Because you don't know better. But there is a point where I think you have to find your own voice. And again, all this is based on my idea that mediation is personal. Okay. Now, having said that, let's move on. And now let me share with you the steps that I have in mind if I start from those assumptions and if I start from my view on mediation and my role. First of all, I assume that first impression is very important. Makes a lasting impression. And therefore, I make sure, for example, that the first time that I meet with the parties, either in person or online, they can hear me well, they can see me well, my lighting is good, my distance from the camera is good, my backdrop is not disturbing, it's not distracting. Okay. For example, yesterday I did a simulation with a mediator in New Zealand. She had a fantastic backdrop with a plant. So she came across, without saying a word, she came across as a caring person. So the first impression is important. Now, the way I see the online mediation is that after a while, you are so used to being online that you're not even aware that you're online. I mean, it's like when you write a book on your computer, you think something, you write it on your screen, but you don't look at the keyboard. It goes, sentence here, sentence on the screen. So it becomes second nature. And I think that's the ideal situation, when being online becomes second nature and you are totally comfortable with it. Okay, having said that, this is the next step. I will send an email to all participants and I will say, my name is Giuseppe Leone. I am the mediator assigned by our mediation center. And I confirm that next week, Tuesday at 10 o'clock, we'll have an online mediation via Zoom. Now, I say via Zoom, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. Now, before next week, I would like to have a 15, 20-minute private chat with each of you. Now, if a party is represented by an attorney, I prefer that I have a chat with both of them, because I assume that that person trusts her attorney more than she trusts me, at least at the beginning. Okay. So I'll say I would like to have a private chat with you to make sure that our audio and video connection works properly, and also to give you an outline of what is going to happen when we meet next week. And finally, to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. So this is my step. Now, why do I want to meet the parties privately? Because I think that, at least for me, it's easier to create a rapport individually rather than in a joint session. And it's also important to establish a relationship, a rapport with them before even talking about the disputes. So that's a choice that I'm making. You may make a different choice. Okay. Okay, so the time comes, I am in a private chat with both of them, say in the party number one, attorney number one. The first thing I ask them, of course, to show respect for them is, how would you like me to call you? And they will tell me, okay. And then I'll ask them, is this the first time that you participate in mediation, or you participated in mediation before? Now, so I don't start to telling them what mediation is. I ask them, is this the first time? If they say, no, this is not the first time, we participated in mediation before, then I'll ask them, nice, great, okay. Would you mind telling me what you find useful in those previous mediations that you had? So I try to utilize their experience to make it easier for me to explain the benefits of mediation, okay? Then I say, okay, suppose it's the first time, okay. Then I say, all right. Now, before I explain how mediation can help you resolve your case, okay? Do you mind if I ask you a question? No. Can I ask you, when was the last time that you talked with the other party directly? A week ago, a month ago, 6 months ago? And they can say, a month ago. Okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how openly and respectfully were you able to talk to each other? 0 means waste of time. We don't listen to each other. The other guy doesn't, it is impossible. A 10 means we were perfectly able talking to each other. Okay, you can guess that the answer will be somewhere between 0 and 5. Okay, so, all right, okay. Okay, so now let me explain how mediation can be useful in your case. Mediation will give you an opportunity, finally, to be heard, to be understood by the other party. Even though you disagree, but at least you will have a chance to be understood. So you will have a chance to be understood, and the other party as well, okay? And then I explain them how, but it will take you some time to explain how. Okay, so it will give you an opportunity to be understood, okay? To be able to clarify what happened, and also to clarify any misunderstandings that there may have been along the way. Situation where, for example, you did something and the other person understood something completely different, which is something, again, that is mentioned in that book, Difficult Conversations, okay, by Douglas Stone and Sheila Hinn. Okay, now, after you have understood each other and both of you know where you're coming from, then I will ask you, are you interested in suggesting ideas how your case could be resolved in a way that meets both of your needs, and in a way that you feel both good about it? Well, if you're able to do that, I will write up the agreement, you will sign it electronically, and that's it. On the contrary, If you're unable to reach an agreement, no problem, because mediation is by definition confidential. So in mediation, you have everything to gain, but nothing to lose. If there is an agreement, great. If there's no agreement, whatever you said, offered, counteroffer, doesn't matter. Okay. Now, as for my role as a mediator, my role is simply to make sure that you're able to communicate clearly, openly, and respectfully. I do not make any decisions for you. From my point of view, you're both right. There is no right or wrong. We are both right, even though you have different interpretation of what happened. And finally, since communication is so important in what is going to happen next week, we can communicate any way you feel comfortable, any way you feel comfortable with. If you are comfortable being in the same room with the other, we can have joint session. If you are not comfortable being in the same room, we can have a private session. If your attorneys want to have a private meeting among themselves because they speak the same language, that can be done too. If during the online mediation you need a break because you're not so sure whether you want to go ahead with agreement or not, that's fine too. You don't need absolutely to make any decision unless you are ready for it. And finally, mediation is voluntary. You can decide to get out anytime you like. Okay, then I stop and say, what questions, not do you have any questions, I said, what questions do you have about what I just tried to explain, how mediation can help you, how you will communicate, how it will help you understand each other, how we'll be on the same screen and so on. My role as a mediator. What questions do you have? And that will be pretty much the end of my 15, 20 minutes conversation with each party. So that when we meet together the following week, I've already covered a lot of ground. They already have seen me. They already heard me. They've seen my style. They've heard my voice. Okay, so then we'll start talking about their dispute. Okay, now, keep in mind, I don't know whether you know this, in my speech, I purposely avoided words like negotiation or compromise or give and take, because those words are music to the attorney's ears, but throw people off. They have a very negative connotation. Also, I never said proposal. I said ideas. Okay, so I think that the choice of words is critical. Okay, make an idea, or do you have a different idea? Rather say, do you have a different proposal? Okay. Okay, now, finally, I would like to ask you something. I started by sharing with you a set of assumptions. I share with you my view of mediation, and then I came up some ideas or taking some steps. Do you think that this approach, theory, practice, can be useful? Or do you think that creating a rapport with the parties is something that you either have or you don't? Doesn't require any preparation. Either you have an instinct for it or you don't. Because if you think that this approach can be useful, theory, assumptions, my view of mediation, and then practice, okay, then I would like to invite you to participate in my free online mediation simulations where you can test your own assumptions and your own approach. So you can find out from other mediators whether your assumptions are correct from the party's perspective, not from your perspective, but from the party's perspective. And that is pretty much the end of my presentation.
No, thank you so much. That was very insightful, and so many. I love how language is so important, and it matters most definitely, and it definitely showcases your endless experience and how because I recall, when they teach initially mediation, they talk about like, oh, collaboration, negotiation, and that's not, you have to think about who else is in the room, and
Right.
and you also don't want to scare the participants who are there, who are hopefully, at the same time trying to build some trust simultaneously, and that's so important. Someone asked, yes, the recording will be on our YouTube channel, and an outline can be emailed to you as well. But I did have just a couple extra questions here. So what attracted you specifically to the field of mediation?
Okay, when I moved to Hawaii from Italy 30 years ago, I decided that I want to do something for the community I live in.
Oh.
I read an announcement in the newspaper. I had no clue what mediation was about. I signed up. At that time, the mediation training offered by the Mediation Center of the Pacific was free. So I said, great, okay. And then I discovered something magic. I discovered that I'd been married in Italy and divorced, and I never understood anything of what was going on. The fact that I finally could understand how conflict comes about, and how important it is to understand, to listen to the people, to understand their needs, is something that I didn't know about. And that's why I got married and divorced, and it was like a movie. I had no clue what happened. So that was a key moment in my life, the first training, which happened by chance. As I said, I had no idea what mediation means. And so that was in 1997. And I'm so grateful to the Mediation Center, the Pacific, that still now I'm a volunteer mediator for them.
Thank you. And it's so true. Many of us, it's not part of the normal like vernacular of, you're taking classes on science and math and English. Mediation, like that's not there. And then barely, I feel as though people either learn about mediation because they hear about it and they go through a training, or they have to go through a mediation themselves and be a dispute or a participant being mediated. And hopefully they have a positive experience so that they're not thrown off by it. But yeah, I think getting awareness of it is so important. I'm hoping we can continue to do that. And that's exactly been my experience as well. And we had somebody actually had a question in the audience. Is there an option for in-person mediation rather than online? Should a mediator choose in person?
Okay, great question. I think that a mediator should be comfortable in both settings, in person and online. If there is a choice, but sometimes there isn't, especially now with the COVID. If there is a choice, I still prefer in-person mediation, because there is something, I don't know, something magic in the air, right? Okay, if there is a choice. However, I think that choice is better left to the parties. They can decide what they feel most comfortable with. For example, some parties do not want to be in the same room with the other person because it upset them. And I think that's why the party's preference should come first. And the mediator should be able to accommodate and respect that preference.
Thank you. Somebody else had a question around, do you think mediation is corrupted when it is a legislative requirement, such as parties must mediate before they can access the courts, such as it is with divorce? That's one example.
Do I think, well, sorry, can you repeat?
Do you think mediation is corrupted when it's a requirement, such as like example is like here in Hawaii, if someone's filing for divorce, they actually have to go through mediation before they can fully go through their divorce.
Well, I think that like in divorce cases, right? Like in divorce cases, we're talking about people's lives, and we're talking about their children's lives. A judge even a fast-speaking judge probably cannot spend more than 20 minutes of that case. And that case is only case number 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think it's a good idea to give the divorcing spouses a chance to talk. And yeah, I think it's a good idea because it's about people's lives. So, however, when they meet with a mediator, I think it's also fair for the mediator to say, this is voluntary. Okay, so the fact that you're here because the judge told you so, it doesn't mean that you have to agree on anything. Yeah, I think it's fair. And I think it's fair, especially when you're divorces, if you can understand something about your divorce. I divorced, as I said, without understanding anything. The only thing I knew was how angry I was. How angry I was at my spouse and at myself because I didn't see it coming. But that's a different webinar.
No,
okay.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, and I mean, as a mediator, you are basically the front line of that anger. And so you're trying to build rapport while the people aren't even maybe sometimes there. So that's trying to find the right time is so important.
Well, let me share with you a technique that I use to try to diffuse the anger. Okay. Instead of saying, tell me what happened, I say, tell me what happened if you were a news reporter. Tell me what happens if you are not in the person, if you are just reporting on that. And that already, creates a distance, an emotional distance, okay? Also, when years ago, I made a mistake of saying in mediation, when you hear the party saying something you disagree with, don't interrupt each other. Write down what you want to say, and then you can say when is your time to speak. And then I realized something obvious. If people are busy writing down things, they're not listening. Okay, so then I said, okay. And I said, Jose, since I recognize Lisa Jacobs there, hi Lisa, okay. I said, Jose, tells Lisa what happened from your perspective, okay? And then I say, Lisa, pay attention, because before I ask you to tell Jose what happened, I'm going to ask you to summarize what he just said to his satisfaction. When he's satisfied that you heard him, then you have gained your right to speak your mind. So I play on this listening stuff, which, as I said, to me is key in conflict, listening. I somehow think that most conflict comes about misunderstanding. For example, if I say to someone, oh, I can see that you need help. Let me help you, right? So my intent is good. He said, back off. Why don't you mind your own business? So there is a clash between my intent and the impact. And that's exactly what Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen talk about in those books. So these are things that I've learned by reading, not because I learned them at school.
No, thank you. That's very helpful. And I bet when you ask them to tell the story as a news reporter, it kind of gets a good curveball. Or probably they're like, wait.
Yeah. That's
really good.
That's a way of diffusing.
Yes, that's really good. We have a few minutes, but I still have a couple of questions, and feel free for the audience to send in your questions as well. But any words of wisdom for new professionals exploring mediation as a career?
Yes, there is an excellent video. It's a 30-minute video on YouTube by Stephen Walker. And he's an accomplished mediator in England. And he explains why the decision of becoming a mediator has to be taken, accepting the mediation is like starting any other business. So being good at mediation, being passionate about it is a good start, but certainly not enough. And in that video, he explains why, for example, choosing a niche market, okay, is important, but how those people in that market know that you exist? And the question is, do you want to become another divorce mediator, or do you want to figure out something something different? All right.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to actually, I'll share Stephen Walker's YouTube channel in the chat in a minute.
Oh, okay. You have that?
I found his YouTube channel, so I'll.
Okay.
There's a lot of good ones. I wasn't quite sure which one people would want, but also, are there any differences in the way that you help people resolve their conflict as a mediator and the way you resolve conflict in your own personal life?
For many years, there was a difference, not anymore. And I'm glad that there isn't. For many years, I didn't realize that how helped people resolve their conflicts was very different the way that I resolved conflict with my wife, my friends, and so on. Not anymore. Because I think now that we all have the same human needs. And mutual respect, listening, is the key of resolving any conflict for other people or for ourselves. So I talked about it in an article that I wrote, how important it is that we resolve our own conflict the same way that we help other people resolve their own conflict. At least that's what I think.
Thank you. And one of my last questions here is, what do you do yourself to take care of yourself as a mediator? I mean, you're constantly listening, taking in, and imagine processing people's problems. I mean, I imagine it's not something where you're like, okay, workday's done or mediation's done, I can now pivot and do, so what do you do to take care of yourself on a daily basis?
Well, a couple of things. First, there's a lot of work to do in the yard where we live. And we live in the place where my wife was born. So for me, taking care of the yard is a way of paying respect to my wife's parents. So that by itself is relaxing. And then when it's not raining, like yesterday, I walk. And I noticed that a walk is a great source of ideas. Just walking. And I wish I knew how some ideas come all of a sudden while you're walking. But I noticed that, at least to me, when I walk, it feels great. And I can walk either next door or on the beach, Ilani Kai, but walking for me is good. Walking and working in the yard.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful as we try to find ways to balance. So we always talk about a balance, although some people mention that it's just survival sometimes, not so much of a balance, but gotta stay optimistic nonetheless. Any questions? Oh, we do have any more questions from our audience? You are all able to unmute yourselves, so if anyone wants to just chime in.
Was this useful? Let me ask you a question. Was this useful? Does it make sense? I mean, you can do this.
I'm gonna say it made a lot of sense to me, especially your choice. I like that proposal. Don't use the word proposal. Use ideas. I like that a lot. And I noticed that the word negotiate for most people is. I do that all the time. So negotiate is not a negative word for me. But when people hear the word, I have to negotiate. It's always, oh, I'm going to lose, because there's a sense that when you negotiate, you're negotiating down. It's never, most people almost never think, hey, I can negotiate this, I can get more here. No, it's always, I'm going to have to negotiate with them. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get less. I'm not going to get everything I want. And I don't know how to change that except for avoid the word negotiate and say, you know, you can work out your own settlement, you know, as the best word I have, instead of telling people to negotiate. Because as soon as you say negotiate, there's that dread that I'm going to have to settle for less than what I wanted. So I couldn't agree with you more about the use of the words. Now, I've read the book, Difficult Conversations, a couple times, and I suspect I'm one of the few people that didn't get much out of that book. I don't know why. I've read a lot of good books on negotiation, but that one, I just don't know about it. It's a popular book. I see a lot of rave reviews on it. My own personal view, and I read it once and then I reread it because everybody else raved about it, and I still I made something I'm missing on that book, but that's not neither here or there. But no, I thought you had a lot of good thoughts. What my dilemma is, most of this is I love what you do, except I got an hour and a half to settle a dispute with the mediation center, and to do all of that
Sure,
in an hour and a half, I don't know how I could do that in an hour and a half and get a settlement typed up and signed and given to the parties and everything else. I could, you know, I love what you do. I could do that when I was doing employment mediation for the Department of Navy. I had plenty of time. I don't have enough time to, I barely have enough time to develop any rapport. I agree with you. The power of rapport is amazing. And it's a skill that you can learn. It's not something, I don't think, you know, like a lot of things you can learn to be, develop the trust and stuff with time, you know. So
thank you. You're welcome.
Robert, thank you so much for, and actually, when you were talking about negotiate, it just triggered with me like car salesman.
Right, exactly.
Everyone's like, I don't want to deal with a car salesman. Like, it's so exhausting.
Yeah, the idea of buying a lemon, right? A lemon.
Yes. So they're like, is there some other way? But yeah, no, thank you so much. I just want to, well, first of all, I just want to take a few minutes here. I don't know if there's any other questions, but there's a lot of wonderful.
There are some people raising hands. I'm not so sure.
Oh, yeah. Raju, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Wonderful conversation. Appreciate it. I just wanted to ask, you think that NVC, you mentioned NVC, and I've been a big fan of NVC. I'm wondering why NVC is not being taught in our schools, and how could it be more accepted? And I'm going to mute so I listen to you.
Thank you. Now, NVC stands for nonviolent communication, right? I don't know why it's not taught at school. I know that when I found that book, I thought, wow, that's amazing. Because in mediator's language, right, we were taught that there are parties' positions and interest. And now I realize that there is something else. There are human needs that all parties have in common. So now I search for a possible resolution, not at position or interest, but at the lowest level, human needs. Which needs are yours or yours are not being met? Do you feel respected? So I speak a language of needs, which is a language that Marshall Rosenberg invented, as far as I know. But I don't know why that is not taught at school. I have no idea. All I know that book changed my view of conflicts. And my view of how I talk to my wife, for example. Because conflict is not something about, conflict and mediation have a lot in common, right? The difference is that mediation is about somebody else's conflict, but the way that people behave in conflict is very similar to the way we behave in conflict. And once understood what Marshall Rosenberg meant by human needs, I thought, wow, I never understood that.
No, I appreciate that perspective very much, because in these conflicts, these global conflicts, people have their basic needs.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Raju, I did want to offer that. So one of the things that have been taught for, I mean, especially here in Hawaii for, actually they're going on 36 years now, is peer mediation. And so when we talk about nonviolent communication, that is embedded into peer mediation training. It started back in the 80s, and there had been a conference, and one of the hurdles that peer mediation has had to deal with, unfortunately, is the educational system refocuses from time to time. It was peer mediation was the thing to focus on, and it was bullying, and fast forward to now it's social emotional learning. I mean, when we look at the skill sets that's being taught, though, it's kind of like they're just rebranding, but unfortunately there's a lot of having to pivot. One of the reasons nowadays that students, although they may be taught peer mediation but not allowed to practice it in the school system, is the concern of getting sued. And not from the students, the concern from upper administration of, as we all know with mediation, it has to be a private process. It has to be, in order for you to build rapport, you need to be able to have that create that safe space. And the people at the top want to know everything that's going on, because to avoid or pivot from a lawsuit ideally. And so unfortunately, I guess it's really fear that has unfortunately not allowed for some of our students to be able to practice it actively. But thankfully there is still a peer mediation conference that actually the 36th annual one will be happening this upcoming March or April 2023. I can send you all more information about that as it develops.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and then any other questions from our audience? Well, we have a lot of wonderful comments here. Very useful, good reminder about importance of language. You make it sound so simply. You're an artist, very helpful, insightful. Learned a lot of subtle nuances that affect the process. Very useful for all perspectives, particularly I'm training myself to understand about nonverbal messages. I'm learning to understand you by all, how important words are in video mediation. This is very important. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Well, if there are no other questions, I do want to thank Giuseppe for allowing us to learn better about your work and the wealth of knowledge that can guide future peace-related projects. Truly appreciate you opening up about your experiences, lessons learned, tips you come to today's dialogue. So thank you for your kindness and leadership in the field as we explore our own journey into the profession. Last but not least, I want to thank everyone today for joining the webinar. We truly appreciate your interest and support in joining us to learn about exploring the journey into this profession through our Careers in Peace Building Talk Story series. Thank you so much.